Well, this is great. We've been planning this for quite a time. And I must admit, I was the picnic skeptic. I thought, we're all going to melt out here. So I have a booklet for you called The Church Picnic, Will We Survive? I think you will get through it pretty good. Anyway, thank you to Bernie and his church who really bore the burden for all of this today. But so good to see so many old friends and some new friends as well. My text for today, I grew up Anglican, so you'll have to excuse me. My text for today is John chapter 21. Burmy told me to speak about eating. And you know, when you stop to think about it, you can almost dive in anywhere in the Bible and you will find people eating, whether it's the Old or the New Testament. We've got Abraham actually preparing a meal for the eternal God. Incredible. Jacob and Laban, when they wanted to make peace, they had a friendship meal. And of course, in the book of Exodus, something that hardly gets talked about, that the elders of Israel actually ate and drank with the Lord on Mount Sinai for 40 days. That's something that just strikes me as being very strange. But as Bishop Norman T. Wright has said, probably the strangest book of all is the book of John. The book of John casts the light of the resurrection on all the things that Jesus was doing. Because we meet in John chapter 21, and as a fisherman's son, I couldn't resist going over this. You remember John 21. Jesus has actually been resurrected and ascended, which is, we're learning essentially the same thing. He went up to God. He was always in God's presence. And what is this strange thing that takes place on the Sea of Galilee in John chapter 21? Someone said John was deep enough for an elephant to drown in and thin enough for a fly to skip across. You can take it shallow or you can take it deep. But I think John is one of these marvelous, mystical, mysterious books that's Jesus is like he's 3 feet off the ground, it seems, in the book of John. The book of Mark, he's like one of us. You know, someone touched me. Who touched you? There's 3,000 people here. Lord, you asked who? You know, he goes to Nazareth. He can't work a miracle. But the book of John focuses on Christ as divine. And so you see this great incident you all know about. You're all Bible literates. Jesus appears the third time after his resurrection. You might think that a man with a spiritual body who is always perpetually in touch with the Father in heaven would have a lot more things to do after his resurrection than have a barbecue. Isn't that strange? I mean, the Bible's always ahead of us. It just never ceases to amaze me. And you know what happened? They see this stranger on the shore. As Mike Fazell said, there are all these misty, moody scenes in the Gospels sometimes. So it's real early in the morning. The disciples are out fishing, and they see this stranger on the shore. And John, with the insight that he alone seemed to have, said, "It's the Lord." And you know what happened? If I were to give you a test, what did Peter do next? He just jumped into the ocean and did his Johnny Weissmuller Olympic swim all the way to the beach of the Sea of Galilee. Of course, he was to learn later on that it wasn't all good news. There was some of that burning Mr. Weber was talking about with Peter. Peter had to be sat on quite often. But here he is. He's out there on this. And when they come ashore, what happens? When they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. So I guess theoretically you could start a church saying, we're going to do fish and bread communion. And you don't have to be so hidebound as we used to think we had to be. But here they are. And there's a stranger, and he's laying out fish and bread in a charcoal fire. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you've just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard the ship and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, and 153 of them. Somebody counted them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. This reminds them of the calling back at the beginning of his ministry. Reminds them that they're supposed to be fishers of men. And even though they've had a couple of resurrection appearances, they're still scattered and on. They're not, as Bishop Wright said, it's just not that they're in something that's beyond nature. It's something that's beyond supernature. They can't quite process all that is happening here. You remember when Jesus appeared in the upper room, they thought they'd seen a ghost. It was Jesus in his what we call spiritual body. They thought they'd seen a ghost, and in order to prove to them that he wasn't a ghost, Burmy, what did he do? He ate. Remember, he said, the question is hard to believe in the book of John. Do you have anything here to eat? I should ask all of you, do you have anything here to eat? Yeah. Yes, and you're waiting. But look at all that time you left. Yeah, what a strange thing. Jesus picks up a broiled fish and a piece of honeycomb. This is the resurrected, ascended Messiah. And he's eating and drinking with his disciples. I just found that to be astounding. Now, none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. See, John is telling us that this is a Twilight Zone type experience. You know, they know it's Jesus, and yet he's the same, and yet he's different. And this is this mystical, marvelous, magical tour we get after his resurrection in the book of John. They knew it was the Lord. So Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This is like a takeoff on the communion service, right? It's these little echoes of communion here. They knew it was the Lord. This is now the third time Jesus appeared to the disciples after his resurrection. And as the son of a fisherman, I have to ask, who gathered the bricks? Who provided the bread? But especially my father would want to know, who split the fish? Because if you know anything about fishing, you know that's a rare skill. The fish slit it at the throat, opened it up, and you get the fillets left behind. Who's doing all of that? Again, we have to. And I don't think he did magic hocus pocus. You know, the Bible believes in miracles, but miracles are not just trick shows. So Jesus, I think, is showing by this action early in the morning that he wants to be their friend. That all is forgiven. You know, they failed him badly in many ways. And yet here he does it. And how does he do it? He does it through the mechanism of preparing a meal, of eating a meal. And that's what we're going to do here in a very, very few minutes. So I thank you all for coming and all of our three churches being together, because in the Bible, when you want to show friendship, when you want to show fellowship, when you want to show intimacy, it's usually around a food table somewhere. As I begin to visualize John 21, I see them sort of leaning. You know, they're not all standing up with lecterns, you know, taking the bread and the wine in a formal way. They're lying back, they're leaning back, and they're still sizing up Jesus. They're still processing what has taken place through the resurrection and the ascension. How many times in the Gospels do you read, and Jesus sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, right? I mean, it's easy to read that over, but in the Middle East, you don't go into an Arab friend's home. You don't leave unless you eat. It's just still a very good Middle Eastern custom today. So I thought, hey, this is pretty good. One thing about a meal is it's non-threatening, right? It's non-threatening. See, they love Jesus. They have a spark. They have a dedication. Simon, good old impulsive Peter, he jumps in the water and does his Olympic swim, you know, to the Sea of Galilee, to the shore there. But there has been a past, and that past has made them feel a bit guilty. And Jesus has said, all is forgiven. Let's be friends. Let's share this meal together. The rest of the story you pretty well know. Even Peter came out of it pretty good. A meal is all about two things. Loving fellowship, which we see captured here today, and happy communication. Ever notice how the word communication and communion are basically the same word? Loving fellowship and happy communication. Jesus loves his disciples. He loves his people. And even after they had let him down, even after he's the mighty Son of God the ascended Messiah. He stoops down into the earth and makes them a barbecue. I could have called this Barbecue with the King, but we couldn't change it at the last minute. So thanks for coming. And in the spirit of the Old and New Testament, I'd like to say, let's eat.